Patagonia, Argentina. Land of wind, land of ice, land at the end of the world. The wind arrives without warning. Glaciers carrying millennia, peaks that challenge the clouds, coastlines where penguins share the shore with whales. Argentine Patagonia spans 5 provinces, Neuquén and Rio Negro to the north, with their linga forests, Chubut in the center, with its wild Atlantic coast, Santa Cruz at the heart, home to the largest ice fields outside the poles, and Tierra del Fuego to the south, where the continent breaks apart before surrendering to the ocean. The native peoples called these lands the place where sky and earth meet. The European explorers arrived and could not find words to describe it. Today's travelers still can. Welcome to Argentine Patagonia. Perito Moreno Glacier. At the far south of Patagonia, an imposing wall of ice advances slowly over Lake Argentina. The Perito Moreno Glacier stretches across a vast surface, one of the few glaciers on the planet in dynamic equilibrium, pushing water into the lake with a force that scientists are still studying. The ice is not white, it is blue. A deep, impossible blue that comes from centuries of compression, where air bubbles have been forced out of the glacial mass until it becomes an almost perfect crystal. Blocks of ice break away without warning. Tons of ice crash into the lake with a thunderous roar that echoes off the surrounding hills for several seconds. The tourists watching from the walkways fall silent after each collapse, as if the mountain had said something important. During the years when the glacier advances far enough to touch the Magallanes Peninsula, the lake is divided into 2 sections at different water levels. Pressure builds over months until the ice tunnel explodes, releasing millions of liters in a rupture that can last for days. The Perito Moreno is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and anyone who sees it understands immediately why. Cave of the Hands. In a canyon on the Patagonian Plateau, the rock walls hold the oldest message in South America. The Cave of the Hands contains more than 800 imprints of human hands, painted between 9,000 and 13,000 years ago. Mostly left hands, pressed against the rock with fingers spread open, as if waving from the other side of time. The artists placed their hand on the rock and blew mineral pigments around it to mark its outline. Alongside the hands, there are guanacos in motion, geometric figures, and hunting scenes that archaeologists interpret as records of rituals and territories. The Tehuelche hunters who lived in these caves left their collective signature here, proof that they existed and that these lands belonged to them. The Pinturas River Canyon frames the site with towering ochre walls, while the river runs below through poplars and vegetation that contrasts with the barren plateau above. Petrified forest. On the Santa Cruz Plateau, a forest that died 150 million years ago. The Jaramillo Petrified Forest Natural Monument preserves fossilized Araucaria trunks of extraordinary dimensions, likely the largest in the world. Trees that grew when dinosaurs still roamed Patagonia, buried by volcanic ash, and turned to stone over the course of millennia. The petrification process slowly replaced each organic cell with silica minerals, preserving the tree's structure with astonishing precision. The growth rings are visible. The bark texture remains intact. Only the weight reveals that this is no longer wood. The Patagonian wind eroded the plateau over millions of years, leaving these silent giants exposed across a landscape of ochre and violet hues that seems to belong to another planet. The trunks lie on barren ground with no vegetation around them, like abandoned sculptures in an open-air museum. Guanacos graze among the petrified trunks with complete indifference, oblivious to the weight of the geological history surrounding them. Uppsala Glacier. The Uppsala is one of the most extensive glaciers in the southern hemisphere outside Antarctica. Its imposing ice front rises tens of meters above the lake's surface, calving blocks of ice that drift for weeks before dissolving. The icebergs floating in front of the glacier display every geometry imaginable. Some emerge as perfectly vertical blue monoliths. Others have flipped over, exposing the oldest ice at their base, stained with a blue so intense it looks artificial. The Uppsala is retreating. Scientists have recorded a significant loss over recent decades, exposing rock that had not seen sunlight since the last ice age. The lake filling the space where ice once stood grows larger every year, drifting among these icebergs in silence, with the glacier front in the background and the snow-covered Andes on the horizon, is an experience that has no equivalent anywhere else in the Americas. Cerro Torre. In the heart of Los Glaciares National Park, a granite needle rises 3,128 meters above sea level and defies the best climbers in the world. Cerro Torre is considered one of the most difficult peaks on the planet. Its nearly vertical walls, the ice that crowns its summit, and the unpredictable Patagonian weather make it a target that has cost decades of attempts and several lives. The first undisputed ascent was not achieved until 1974. From El Chaltén, the trail to Laguna Torre winds through Lenga and Nair forests before revealing the glacial cirque. The silhouette of the Torre is unmistakable, narrower and more vertical than any other peak in the Andes, with an ice formation on the summit that changes shape with every storm. Mount Fitzroy. A few kilometers from Cerro Torre, another granite giant dominates the Patagonian skyline, standing more than 3,400 meters tall. Mount Fitzroy, also known as Chaltén in the Tehuelche language, means the mountain that smokes. Clouds catch permanently on its peaks. The trek to Laguna de los Tres is the most demanding and most photographed hike from El Chaltén. A strenuous journey with a steep final climb over loose rock that ends at a viewpoint where the Fitzroy is reflected in a lagoon of intense turquoise. The granite of the Fitzroy is different from other Andean peaks. Its walls rise in nearly perfect columns, polished by glaciers over thousands of years into surfaces that climbers describe as a technical dream. The summit was first reached in 1952 by the French mountaineers Lionel Terray and Guido Magnon, an expedition that changed the history of world alpinism. Lake Lacquer. In the north of Patagonia, where the Andes lose elevation and Araucaria forests blanket the slopes, an emerald-colored lake marks the gateway to the province of Neuquén. Lake Lacquer stretches toward the border with Chile, nestled between mountains covered in coihue, cypress, and linga trees that change color with the seasons. San Martín de los Andes sits on the shores of Lacquer, with an architecture of wood and stone that echoes the European alpine style, surrounded by nature that needs no embellishment. The Araucarias covering the hills are the same species that existed when dinosaurs roamed these lands. The waters of Lacquer are so clear that the sandy bottom and stones can be seen perfectly several meters down. Lanín volcano. On the border between Argentina and Chile, Lanín volcano is the highest peak in northern Patagonia and one of the most symmetrical volcanic cones on the planet. Its flawless shape emerges on the horizon from tens of kilometers away, instantly recognizable from every direction. The Mapuche people considered it the dwelling place. The ascent of Lanín takes 2 days and requires a special permit from the National Parks Administration. Mountaineers set out before dawn from base camp, advancing over hard-packed snow with crampons and ice axes until they reach the summit, where the crater emits sulfurous gases and the wind cuts with relentless force. Around the volcano, Lanín National Park protects the most extensive Araucaria forest in Argentina. These prehistoric trees cover the slopes to great heights, mixing with Nair and Lenga trees that surround glacial lakes of impossible colors. Lake Nahuel Huapi. In the heart of the Andean Patagonia, a vast lake stretches between mountains cloaked in forests and glaciers. Nahuel Huapi is the most famous lake in Argentina and the centerpiece of the country's oldest national park, established in 1934. Its arms reach into the hills, creating peninsulas and bays that kayakers can explore for days without seeing the same landscape twice. The water of Nahuel Huapi changes color with the depth and light, deep blue at the center, turquoise green in the shallows, nearly black when clouds blanket the sky before a storm. The clarity is absolute. On clear days, the stone bottom is visible several meters below the surface. San Carlos de Bariloche grew along the lake shores with an architecture of stone and dark wood, inspired by the Swiss Alps, surrounded by hills that snow blankets from June through October. Mount Tronador. At the end of a glacial valley a few hours from Bariloche, the tallest mountain in northern Patagonia thunders constantly with the sound of glaciers breaking free from its slope. Mount Tronador reaches over 3,500 meters and earns its name, which translates to thunderer, from the deafening roar produced by the Black Glacier when its blocks crash into the void. The Black Glacier is one of the most unusual phenomena in the Patagonian Andes. Its surface is covered by a layer of dark rocky debris accumulated over centuries, creating a glacier that looks like stone and contrasts sharply with the white ice of the neighboring glaciers. The rock acts as insulation, slowing the melting and preserving the ice underneath. The hanging glaciers clinging to the walls of Tronador break away without warning, sending cascades of ice and rock down the vertical slopes with a rumble that shakes the ground. Tourists watching from the Black Glacier overlook learn to recognize the seconds of silence that precede each collapse. The valley leading to Tronador winds through forests of Coihue and Orion, with the Manso River running parallel to the road over moss-covered stones. Los Alerces National Park. In the northwest of Chubut, a forest of ancient trees covers the slopes of the Patagonian Andes with a density and an age unmatched anywhere in South America. Los Alerces National Park protects the last virgin forests of the Patagonian cypress, a tree that can live 4,000 years and reach 60 meters in height. The Patagonian cypress grows barely 1 millimeter in diameter per year. The park's lakes, Futalufquén, Verde, Rivadavia, and Menendez, connected to one another by glacial rivers, form one of the purest lake systems in Patagonia. UNESCO declared Los Alerces a World Heritage Site in 2017. Walking among these trees is an experience that forces you to recalibrate your sense of time. Punta Tombo. On the Atlantic coast of Chubut, south of Trelew, one of the largest mainland colonies of Magellanic penguins in the world arrives at the same spot every year. Between September and April, hundreds of thousands of Magellanic penguins occupy Punta Tombo. The males arrive first in August, locate the same nest from the previous year, and wait for the females with a fidelity that scientists have been studying for decades. Breeding pairs reunite each season with a precision that defies logic. Whoa! The penguins are not afraid of visitors. They walk between tourists' legs, cross the wooden boardwalks without stopping, and ignore the cameras with complete indifference. The chicks, covered in gray down, wait in their nests in a state of permanent hunger, while the adults return from the sea loaded with fish. In March, once the chicks have learned to swim, the entire colony abandons Punta Tombo within days. The coast falls silent until the following September, and the penguins return. They always return. Valdez Peninsula. On the Patagonian Atlantic coast, a vast peninsula juts into the sea like a tongue of arid land that hides one of the most important wildlife spectacles on the planet. The Valdez Peninsula is home to colonies of South American sea lions, southern elephant seals, orcas that hunt at the shoreline, and the largest concentration of southern right whales in the world. Between June and December, these whales arrive at Golfo Nuevo to mate and give birth, using the sheltered waters as a nursery as they have for centuries. The whales approach whale-watching boats to within just a few meters. Their calves learn to swim in these calm waters, while the mothers watch with constant attention. At Punta Norte and Caleta Valdez, orcas practice the most extraordinary hunting technique in the ocean. During high tides, they deliberately launch themselves onto the shore to snatch sea lion pups, momentarily beaching on the sand before sliding back with the pull of the wave. This behavior, scientifically documented in only a handful of regions worldwide, is passed down from generation to generation within family groups. The Valdez Peninsula is the only place on the planet where it is possible to observe, in a single day, and from solid ground, whales, orcas, elephant seals, and Patagonian puma. Emerald Lagoon. A short distance from Ushuaia, a trail winds through Lenga forests and Fuegian peat bogs before revealing an emerald green lagoon nestled in a high mountain glacial cirque. The Emerald Lagoon gets its color from the glacial sediment carried down by the Ojo del Albino Glacier. Fine particles of ground rock suspended in the water absorb light at certain wavelengths, producing that impossible green which shifts in intensity depending on the time of day and the amount of snowmelt entering the water. The half-day trek crosses peat bogs that sink underfoot, forests where Canadian beavers have built dams that flooded entire valleys, and high-altitude zones where vegetation gives way to bare rock. The hike can be done in any season, but in winter the lagoon freezes over and hikers walk across the ice surrounded by snow. The beavers were introduced to Tierra del Fuego in 1946 to develop the fur trade. With no natural predators on the island, their population grew unchecked, transforming entire ecosystems with their dams and channels. The ecological damage is irreversible in many areas. The Alvear Range closes the back of the glacial cirque with rock walls that snow covers for most of the year. When the sky clears over Tierra del Fuego, which is not often the reflection of those peaks in the green water of the lagoon, is an image that does not leave the memory easily. Beagle Channel. South of Ushuaia, the channel that Charles Darwin sailed in 1833 during his historic voyage through the Fuegian archipelago, separates Argentina from Chile with a strip of water that reflects snow-covered mountains on both shores. The Beagle Channel stretches 240 kilometers and connects the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans through the heart of the Fuegian archipelago. Tourist boats from Ushuaia cruise the first stretch of the channel, stopping at islands where wildlife colonies are concentrated. Sea Lion Island is home to hundreds of South American sea lions that pile onto the rocks with a smell and a noise that reach the boat from a distance. The lighthouse at the end of the world rises alone from a rock in the middle of the channel, fulfilling its duty of guiding ships navigating these waters at the edge of the world. The Beagle Channel is more than a waterway. It is the place where the continent surrenders to the ocean, and the traveler understands, in silence, that they have reached the end of the world. Tierra del Fuego National Park. At the doorstep of Ushuaia, the only coastal national park in Argentina reaches the Beagle Channel, marking the point where the American continent yields to the ocean. Tierra del Fuego National Park protects a vast expanse of sub-Antarctic forest, peat bogs, bays, and mountains that represent the final fragment of the Andean range before it sinks into the sea. National Route 3, the southernmost highway in the world, ends here with a sign pointing to Buenos Aires, thousands of kilometers away. The Lenga and Nair forest covering the park changes dramatically with the season. In autumn, the Lengas turn red and orange, creating an explosion of color that contrasts with the permanent green of the Coihue. In winter, snow buries everything under a silence broken only by gusts of wind, and ice crunches underfoot. La Pataya Bay, at the far end of the park, concentrates everything that makes Tierra del Fuego unique. The still water reflects snow-covered mountain. The animals sharing this corner of the world seem indifferent to visitors, unaware that they are at the southernmost point of the continent. From La Pataya Bay, looking south, there is no inhabited land between this point and Antarctica. Only water, wind, and ice. Patagonia is not a destination that can be exhausted in a single visit. Each season transforms the landscape completely. Each return reveals something new. If this journey inspired you, leave a like and subscribe to discover more extraordinary destinations. Tell us in the comments which of these places you would put first on your list. See you at the next destination.